This video is published by mbkpinternational.com. In this video we're going to talk about our Guillotine EC19 Pro version 2 paper cutter and adjusting the angle on the paper push. This would be for if you cut this paper at, like, say 5 inches across here. This is a 5-inch piece, and you go to measure it and one side's 5 inches, the other side's 5.1 inches or whatever. This would be an angle adjustment on your back paper push. A couple things you want to do with a back paper push is you want to make sure you have one of these when you're putting the, let's go here to put it 6 inches. I had the paper in there, he'll catch it a little bit, the paper push. You just want to make sure it's fully and completely against that paper push, because and just light tapping is usually pretty good. If it's not, it's not going to be the machine, and you're going to be doing adjustments, and you're going to be going back and forth forever if you don't get this against the paper push perfectly when you're doing your cuts. Now, when we're doing the adjustment, I'm going to do it a different way where it's even more sure that it's against the paper push, to where you don't make mistakes that way. But it's a good idea if you have this when you're doing your normal cuts day to day, if you want more precision. Okay. First thing I want to do on this is I want to send the paper push to the back, like 19 inches. Yours may only go to 18 possibly. And another thing is, this video would work for like the old EC19 Pro, the version 1, or a lot of cutters. They all pretty much have the same paper push. Just go around to the back here. You get your 3mm hex, and I believe this is a 6mm hex. And the first thing you want to do is you just want to make sure all these are tight, especially this one right here. And this, before you tighten any of those or mess with them, you want to loosen these two here. And it doesn't take much, just about one turn each about. Just make sure they're not tight. And then you want to take these and tighten these down. That was able to turn a little bit. When you do it, if they're really loose, or not really loose, if you have to turn a decent amount, you want to do a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit here, a little bit there. And these are pairs here. This one here, the further back one, against, and these two, these would be pairs you work at the same time, and these would go working at the same time, these two. But for now, before you get started, just make sure they're all tight, especially these back ones. Nice and tight. And just a little bit at a time. If they start moving a lot, just a little bit of time. That way, if you tighten one side down a lot fully and then go to the other side, it's going to be way out of line. So just a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit here, a little bit there. Same with this, a little bit here, a little bit there, until they're both fully tight. Okay, those are fully tight. Now I'm going to snug these down. And I like to put a little counter pressure here this way when I'm cranking this, because you crank it, you see it's going to want to crank it that way. You probably don't have to do it, but I just like to do it just in case, to keep it from twisting it too much and maybe getting it out of line and doing that. So anyway, when you're tightening those two down, tighten them down pretty good. These are pretty snug ones here. I'll put the counter pressure there. Okay, now just make sure you got those tight for your first cut. And what I'm going to do here, I'm going to get it just as I know some people like to do one sheet of paper when they're doing their test cuts. It's not a good idea. This is not a one-sheet paper cutter machine. It can do it, but the accuracy may be a hair off, because it's just hard to, it could actually slide under this possibly, or a little bit. Some people like to cut something in half and match it up. That's not a good idea, because sometimes this paper ain't perfectly 11 by 8.5. Sometimes it's like a 1/16 of an inch longer, or 32nd of an inch longer, and that's all it would take to mess it up. So you just want to do, this is the way I like to do them every day. I've gotten pretty good at this, so I recommend just doing it the way I do it. You get you a little stack, maybe about 1/8 of an inch thick, maybe, I don't know, maybe 20, 30 pages, something like that. And make sure it's nice and straight. Send this back to, I typically do about the 16-inch mark. I like that one for some reason. Send your paper push there. I just like doing the same. Another thing, I don't like putting it over to the side, because then you got two things to worry about. If this is straight, you're good. It's best just to do it right in the middle. And I'm going to hold it up here slightly on both ends here of this paper, and my two fingers pushing here, and just to make sure, tapping it, just to make sure this is completely and fully against this thing. And I even kind of do light drags, even pressure on both sides. And you can see it almost if it's perfectly against that, and It's very important you make sure you get this perfectly against this when you're doing these adjustments, because if you don't, then you're wasting your time. You got to make sure that paper is perfectly against it, like I did there. A little stack about an eighth of an inch high. So we'll come to the front now, and we'll do, this is a new stack, so it's a 8.5 by 11, and I like to do the paper long ways just to give you more adjustment. If it's the narrower it is, the harder it's going to be to adjust the angle. So we'll come forward to 8.5 is the paper, so I'll go to, I like doing 1/4 inch at a time. 8.25, so 8.25 inch. So this will cut off 1/4 of an inch off the paper approximately. Okay, it's on there now. It should be good to go. I'm just going to do a quick cut. And put the eject on for the next time. So push it forward on its own, so I don't have to reach under. Get the left to the side. I just like to kind of grab and tie in a knot. I kind of already messed this stack up. So that one's kind of messed up. Anyway, pull this forward, and all you really need is the top sheet. And just make sure you keep it like this. You don't want to flip it around and not know which side was which. Right now, you know this is the left side as you face the machine, and this is the right side. So let's just keep it that way. And I'll bring it to the back here, and I'll lay it on the back. Of course, you would have had to take off this back cover, so you're going to do that. You can also take this to a table somewhere, wherever you feel more comfortable at, and then you're just going to measure the sides. The best thing I like is a nice metal ruler, but you can't really do it from the end here because it's just too hard to see it. So what I like to do is I like to just line up one side perfectly on the 2-inch line, and then I know it's just going to be 2 inches long all the time. So I'm going to measure it, go to this side first, and perfectly align that on the paper on the 2-inch. Then I'll look over here, and right now that one's a 32nd of an inch long. I'm coming over this side, and right now this one is about a 64th. No, it's about right on. That one's right on. So this is cutting a 32nd of an inch too long over here. So what I'm going to do is, when you adjust this, you've already got all 4 of these tightened. You really only want to adjust these 2 outer ones. Those are the 2, you don't want to mess with those. That's for large adjustments. And on this one, this side's cutting too long. So with this side cutting too long, I'm going to need to pull this side back because this side is too short. So I'm going to need to pull this side back. And to pull this side back, and this is only for these 2 outer ones, you pull this side back. Okay, so if you want to pull this side back, you pull this screw back, which would be counterclockwise like this. And it ain't going to take much for a 32nd of an inch. It's going to be about like that, maybe a couple degrees. And then when you do that, you got to do the opposite over here, and you got to tighten it the other way and tighten it down. And then it's always a good idea after you move that one and tighten a little bit, to come back here and then go the other way with this and make sure this is nice and tight. Okay, that way you get them both tight. You pulled that back, and you really kind of did the adjustment here. You pull this back to give it a little slack so it could do a little adjustment, and then you tighten it down here again. Okay, so now we're going to come back here and I'm going to take this sheet back and put it back in the same order. You don't want to flip them around. I'm going to send this back to the 16-inch mark. And we're going to do another test cut. Again, get this stack nice and straight. And keep it right in the middle. Tap here, just make sure it's fully against it. And slowly, just make sure this top page is the most important to make sure it's fully against, but you want to get the whole stack nice. So that's fully and perfectly against it. Very important step there. Now I last did 8.25, so I do a 1/4 inch at a time so you don't waste too much paper. So it's going to be 8 inches this time on this test. And basically, you're just going to keep doing this until you get it. Hopefully you get it within a few tries. Sometimes it takes, it could take 10 tries or more even, especially if you're not, never done this before. I got the paper push on now, so I should push it out. Much better to have that on. And you can just grab this little strip here and tie that knot like that. Keep it from falling all over the place. Just take the top sheet, keep it, don't twist it around, lay it back here. You need someone with very good vision for this, so if you don't have good vision, make sure you use your reading glasses, because Again, I'm going to go to the 2-inch mark on this because this is the easiest way to do it, right? And line it up perfectly, the middle of that 2-inch line with it perfectly with that. And then once I got it there and I'm holding it steady, then I'll look over here to see see if it's on or if it's a little bit off. So I'll take my time and make sure I line it up perfectly over here on the 2-inch line, and then make sure I'm holding it steady. Then I'll look over here and see, okay, now that one's right on where it should be, 11. It was on the, I cut it at 8, so it's on 10 inches right now because I'm going 2 inches above. So for 2 to 10, it would be 8 inches. That way I can hold this tape on both sides. You also want to make sure you're not doing it at any kind of angle. I know that's just an exaggeration, but just make sure it's nice and straight and even amount each side. I'll do this side, and that one's also. It's actually cutting a little bit long, but they're even. It's cutting like a 32nd of an inch long here, and a 32nd of an inch long there, so that's fine. You adjust the length in a different way. On the V2, it's actually in the software. Very easy to do. So I'm going to check one more time. It's cutting them just slightly long, like a 32nd of an inch. But this side is also cutting slightly long, like a 32nd of an inch. So that's, I got it in one, but I do this a lot. Most people, you would just repeat the process and loosen these two, move whichever side out you want it to. If this side was cutting too short still, you just counterclockwise this screw out, tighten that one down as good as possible, then tighten that one back down. Again, it's very small amounts when you're talking off like a 37th inch. You're talking just like, if I moved it like that much, you know, it's very small amounts you're going to do, and you only want to do these outer ones. You rarely ever want to do these two inner ones for the adjustments. It's for like if you're off like a 1/4 of an inch or something. It's for big adjustments. But you just keep repeating this process until you get it perfect. And you always want, if your length and angle is off, you always want to do the angle first. Get your angle perfect. And if it's a little long on both sides like this is, it's fine, as long as it's measuring exactly the same on these two. You know, in this case, it's measuring a 32nd of an inch long on both of them. So you always want to do the angle first, and then you can go to the length adjustment if you need to do that. And that will be a different video. But that's pretty much it. We can come out here. I'll do a separate video to adjust the length on this. But it's just a matter of taking your time and making sure the paper is perfectly against the back paper push, because that is very important. I like to set it at 16 inches and put the paper in so I can go back there and physically make sure the paper is perfectly against the back paper push in the middle, and then I punch in what it needs to be, like 8 inches. If I were to do another one, I'd go to 7.75, you know, 7 3/4. And then when it's at like 16 inches back there, and then I push it to come to 8 inches, the paper push will come forward and drag this paper forward, keeping the paper perfectly and fully against the paper push. It's a good way to keep the paper. That's a good way when you do any of your cuts. Like if you're going to do an 8-inch, a 10-inch cut, or say an 8-inch cut, set it to 10 inches, and then put the paper against it, and then go to 8 inches, and it'll drag the paper forward to 8, and it will more guarantee the paper's against the paper push. And you can also use this when you, like if I wanted to cut to 8, I go to 10. Put the paper against it. Make sure it's perfectly against it like that, as good as I can with this. And then I come here. Yeah, I already did 8, so I'm gonna go 7.5, 7.5. And now it's being kind of pushed against the paper push to make where it's nicely against it. So it's a nice way to do it, just to make sure all your cuts are as good as they can be. But that's pretty much it. This video is published by mbkpinternational.com.